54 years after Kenya attained self-rule, yesterday President Uhuru Kenyatta led the nation in marking this auspicious occasion. And during that event that was held in Nyeri, the President made a number of promises, among them the construction of a dual extension of the Thika Superhighway as a dual carriageway all the way to Nyeri, Nanyuki, and Isiolo eventually. He also talked about support programs for Kenyans who are 70 years and above, regardless of where they are, through the cash transfer program. But most important is a free primary and secondary education starting January. Now, Mheshimiwa Irungu Kang'ata here is telling us, according to the Jubilee Manifesto, it's actually free day secondary education, not free secondary education. As well, I've been talking to the rest of my panelists, Mheshimiwa Kimani Wamatangi, Senator Kiambu, also Jubilee nominee for the same position, Mheshimiwa Kipruto Arap Kirwa, and today I will say candidate for Trans Nzoia Senate position, apart from being Deputy Party Leader ANC, as well as former Cabinet Minister, and Mheshimiwa Irungu Kang'ata as a candidate for Murang'a Senate seat on a Jubilee ticket, and currently Member of Parliament for Kiharu. Gentlemen, before we took the commercial break, we were looking at this issue, the promise on education. This is a promise that is not isolated to Jubilee. NASA have made the same promise. Is it feasible, considering what we are seeing now in the education sector? And it was your time.
Well, I thought it was my turn, but
you can take it.
You can take it right.
Okay.
I think I'll get back. Well, first, I'm somehow surprised that Mheshimiwa here, Kipruto, appears to suggest that the government is becoming an entity that keeps on doling out things. So if at all what he said is what his party or his coalition is propagating, it means therefore they will not provide free secondary school education. And therefore, I would urge Kenyans to take note of that and not vote for them on that account. Number two,
despite the fact that they've not been in the government, so they've not doled out anything.
No, he has said very clearly here. He has said, no way, we should not have a government that keeps on doling out.
He never understood me.
Well,
you get it. Clear the air.
Again, there are things that generally governments ought to take care about. Even in developed countries like in Western Europe or even in America, any developed country, any rational government must do two things. Number one, it must intervene on matters of health. It needs to take care of health on behalf of the people. This idea of leaving out health, people to come up with ideas how they are going to pay for health using their own means, that tends to punish the poor people more. And therefore, government intervention in health is usually very positive. Number two is education. Again, a good government ought to take care of education and shoulder that budget. By doing that, you ensure equity and equality amongst its...
Give everybody equal chance.
Yes, and therefore, you will find in many societies, and by the way, that is usually provided for and captured in various international instruments, like we have what we call United Nations Convention on Social and Economic Rights, such. You will see such intervention starts from nursery school to primary schools to high schools, in some societies even at the university levels, where people who have passed very well, government pays for their fees in total. And therefore, what we are doing here is something that is very positive. It's going to ensure equity. In fact, we better stop every other thing, including cutting our military budget, including cutting other considerations like let's say for instance protection of the environment. For instance, we cut everything. We take all those resources, we put that in education, because here you're investing in people. Education is about investing in human resources, not investing for the people. People with education will know how to take care of the environment. Exactly, exactly.
Mheshimiwa Wamatangi,
yeah.
This issue of education, somebody says, wouldn't we rather, first of all, make sure what we put in place works perfectly before we escalate it?
Well, I think there's a lot to say about the education sector in Kenya, quite a lot. as I truly support the interventions which are being done right now by the Jubilee government, led by His Excellency the President, and especially in that latest move to remember already from this term, this term of government, we had already scraped off examination fees to make
which worked perfectly well.
Yeah, to make sure that we don't have that pain that students used to go through, that they couldn't sit for the exams just because you can afford to pay for it. And remember, even after that, many young people used to spend days on end or even years. Some of them would go hunting for jobs with copies of certificates. That's the most you can go and obtain from your school, because your certificate cannot be given to you until you clear arrears and so on. So those interventions have gone a long way, and now especially the new one of freeing or rather offering free secondary education. I think that will be a second big leap. But as we look forward, and I've heard His Excellency say this before, the target should be making education free all the way up to university level. That's the way it should be. And I also want to remember that we are just starting with a new curriculum that CS Matiangi launched the other day. And if you reflect on the road we've traveled with education for the last probably 20 years, it's been quite tumultuous. Tumultuous to the extent that, remember, that having teachers strikes has almost been an every year event. It used to be
an annual event.
Not actually only an annual event. It used to be like a seasonal event. You know that after every few months there's going to be a teacher strike, and at least we must commend that since the last time when government engaged them, now there seems to have been some fair agreement and good progress, and we hope and believe that that's maintained, and of course with a good spirit.
Actually, unlike what people were used to, calls for strikes towards an election, this time round we've had TSC talk about we will give teachers their agreed money on 1st July.
Yeah,
which is a good thing.
That's what I was saying, that at least some of those positive things have started happening in education, and that's why I say, although our friends in NASA may want to fire shots in the wild, some landing everywhere, there are some areas where we must say that good work has been done, for example in education. But I wanted to point out that if you look at a lot that has been happening, and if you focus, for example, like from the time when we inculcated the 844 system up to today, you would say that that system did not do our education system any much good. I have young children, young girl who is a candidate, and sometimes I look at the children and the burden they've had to bear to keep up with the system, and I also look at the upper levels, for example at university level, and even at employment level. The big cry has been, we are churning out graduates who are not ready for the job market. We have an education system that is incongruent with the job and work environment to absorb those people. There has to be a lot that requires to be done in education. For example, even what quick answer that we also get to what Mashmo was saying about capitation. If you look at, for example, the number of teachers we have in every school, although they go on strike because they have not been paid and paid on time, we are still heavily understaffed, in schools. By
close to 70,000.
Absolutely. So what one would be saying, and what we should be saying as a nation, is that indeed, if there is any good that we'll be doing to the education center, is to ensure that, as Mheshimiwa was saying, look for every extra penny, including sometimes constraining some budgets, and invest it more in education. That would be the way to go. That way probably I would be saying that we are taking the country into a more progressive mode and potential problem.
Your suggestion clearly is at all order, considering the Abuja Declaration on Health. 60% of about 30% of the budget is supposed to go on health. Is that what happens?
Well, 15%.
is it 30 or 15%? 15%.
Yeah.
That is talk for another day. Mheshimiwa Kirwa, we are on education, and you are of the opinion that rather than subsidize or take up this burden, you should empower parents so that they take it up themselves. How is NASA going to do it? Because you made the same promise.
Well, we've made the same promise, and we are not about to renege on it. But we should not be looking at it in isolation. Remember, close to 30% of school-going children, they're in private schools. And this means that those parents can afford. And it also means that if we are able to assist more parents, we would be able to have quality education, at the same time allow parents to afford the school fees, so that we move to other issues. Because it is not only education that is a problem. There is a problem of food security. And food security, by its total definition, is allowing somebody to afford food, the right quality, the right amount, in a sustainable manner and continuously. So this means that let's not look at issues in isolation. Our area of focus is how do we reduce stealing, how do we reduce corruption, how do we reduce wastage, how do we reduce misallocation. And I did not say by any stretch of imagination, but I like his fertile mind, because he wanted to just spin an issue that I was talking about in a holistic manner. At independence, we say there were three problems for Kenya: ignorance, poverty, and disease. We are still grappling with the same issues almost 54 years
down the line.
So we must look at these things in a very holistic manner and ensure that whatever we do, we are able to take everything through the system and allow the people of Kenya to have something they can afford. In terms of education definition, is that you must have uniform certification of the document that comes out, either at standard 8, at form 4, or university. And I'm not entirely of the school that 844 has been a problem. After 30 years of 844, we should have been doing periodic review to see where it has failed us and where we have succeeded. As we talk now, our people are more technically savvy than they were before the 844 system. The issue of Kiswahili, many places you would hardly find somebody after Form 4 speaking Kiswahili. Today, if you go to any part of Kenya and you listen to students or children in primary schools or secondary schools, they sing very nicely in Kiswahili. They are able to have very nice poems. And this is something that we are raising the level of our people to have effective communication. Part of our problem as a nation is that we have been having a nation of tribes, and Kiswahili can be an equalizer, so that when you speak Kiswahili, whether you are from Murang'a like Mheshimiwa, or Tanzania like myself, or Kiambu like Mheshimiwa Matangi, you are able to speak Kiswahili that is seen to be national.
There's one common denominator.
One common denominator. This is the way to go forward. Otherwise, 844 was a good system, but it never got the periodic review that is supposed to be done.
Actually, most experts say the original configuration of 844 was the best thing that ever happened to this country. But because of the reviews and everything, we are now in the situation we are in. Apart from education, the president made a number of promises. He promised to continue increasing the number of security personnel. He promised that Kenya will remain in Somalia until Somalia is stable. He promised that his government, should he be re-elected, will support the devolution system above the constitutional edicts. And he also talked about levies on milk being waived to make it more affordable, and the subsidy on maize to continue until next season. Do you think this generally addressed the mood of Kenya at the moment? Security both in terms of personal security and food security?
Yes, indeed. They did 100%, except on the issue of security. Personally, I'm not very pro a huge military budget. I'm not very pro a huge police budget. I belong to the school of thought that we should be a more pacific country, and we invest more in military entities like health and education such, from where I sit. But on these other issues, I think that's a very good point. First, on the issue regarding food security, We need more government interventions in ensuring we are more food secure. Maybe we invest more in distribution of seedlings to farmers instead of
seedlings.
Yes, indeed. Number two, on the issue which he has mentioned regarding devolution, we need to celebrate this government, by the way, for the fruits of devolution. It was a government policy to decide to increase the money that is being sent to counties above the constitutional threshold of a minimum of 15% of the national revenues.
Of the audited?
Yes, indeed. Because otherwise, I would imagine a government which needs more money at the central level would have decided in the first year to send just 15%.
Would you rather it be on the audited account or on the budgeted account, the 15% minimum sent to counties?
No, you can't change. You see, it's provided for.
No, I'm asking, would you rather? Because he talks about above the constitutional edicts. Would you rather the government give 15% of the audited accounts or on the budgeted accounts?
Well, you have to follow the constitution in terms of the audited accounts, and therefore I think his ads are tied to that issue. But to me, the
Mheshimiwa, support devolution above the constitutional edicts, above the constitutional provisions.
No, he means the constitution talks of 15%
of the audited accounts.
Yes, of the audited accounts. So then, meaning you can talk of sending 16%, 17%, or 20%. What this government has been doing, it has been sending above, or way above that threshold of 15%.
And my question
audited.
is...
Yes, I get your point. You are talking of audited or budgeted. Well, to me, you cannot talk of budgeted, surely, because that then means you take away the concept of auditing. You give a leeway for failure to look at that aspect of the audited aspect. And by the way, by following that aspect of audited accounts, you help the country in several ways. Number one, parliamentary committee, the so-called PAC committee, is compelled to fast-track the auditing process to ensure those accounts are the current one, so that counties can get more money. Otherwise, if you talk of the budgeted accounts, then the PAC may be sluggish, and therefore you don't have latest audited accounts upon which then government is going to use to send more money to the counties. But my point was, we need to celebrate Uhuru by the fact that he has been sending much more money beyond what is provided for in the Constitution.
Talking about audited accounts and all the rest, somebody would ask, is there goodwill in the government? Because the audit department has been saying they do not have enough staff, they do not have enough budgetary allocation, and that is why counties now expect money for books of accounts that were audited about 2 or 3 financial years back. We'll talk about that. The rest of the promises and the pledges by the president, your take.
Yes.
Food security, human security.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted first to quickly comment on that issue of audit accounts. You know, I'm a member of the Public Accounts Committee. Yeah. And that last point that Mheshimiwa made is really the key. Most of the time, you find that the problem has been using audited accounts which are way backdated.
3, 4 financial years ago.
So you find that there's that incongruency, or rather that inconsistency. But government has been trying to send that even way above. And for example, remember that within the remissions made, there are quite a number of other grants. You know, there are conditional grants, there are incentives. For example, remember like what happened in the health sector when government partnered with counties to supply equipment to hospitals.
Somebody says government forced counties to partner with.
You know, it's debatable. I mean, you know, you can spin it the way depending on where political interest is. But the overall question would be, how has it affected health care at the county level? I mean, if as we've said in this forum before, if somebody in Turkana can now go for a scan in Turkana, if somebody in Mandera or even in Lokichogio can go and for cancer screening in his home area, then you know what you want is the results to help.
The end justifies the means.
So what I was saying is that at the end of the day, if you quantify what has been going out, it's quite quite substantial, but it can be improved, and I believe that's what the president is talking about in the spirit. It can be made better by looking at several incentives to make that good. Now, on the question of security, I just wanted to intervene a little, and I certainly respect Mheshimiwa's opinion that he would rather become more pacifist. But you see, our security situation is not necessarily dictated by what we want. It's also dictated by what's happening around us. For example, like with the threats that we have, the last 2 weeks, I think we've lost quite a number of our people in the northeastern area.
At the north, at the coast.
From those attacks by Al-Shabaab, including some in the previous years here, including the capital city. So when there is that decision to spend more on security, sometimes it's dictated by that. If you look at the situation that has been prevailing in places like Baringo and Pokot and Samburu, those inter-clan and tribal fights, and with a lot of murders, it requires facilitation for the local forces. So sometimes when decisions are made to invest more in security, but like I said, definitely as a political leader you have an opinion, those decisions will be made based on that. But in the other areas, for example, like you said on food security, it goes without saying, we would want to see actually our good project, which has been played for fools by this gentleman of Galana Kulalu. That was one of the best ideas to make this country more food secure. Now, what requires to be done is introduce more research, expand it, provide for water, that is by building dams inside there so that they are self-reliant, and make that project work. If this country is going to be food secure, and I tell you, I visited Turkana some time back, and if you go to Turkana now, visit some of their irrigation projects, you can't believe you're in Turkana. I mean, you go to a place, you went to places, you go and you get maize cobs this big in Turkana that they're growing through irrigation, and they're happy. You expect that you're going to go there and find people half dressed with herds of cattle in the wilderness. Now they're growing their own food, and it's beautiful. So I think in that concept we can do a lot much more in improving food security.
You have been Minister for Agriculture. You come from Kenya's pitted bread basket, Trans Nzoia. The president promises to make sure that levies on milk will be waived to make it more affordable, and that maize subsidies will continue until end of next season. I want you to put the South African situation in context with what we are going through and the president's promise. Last year, they had severe drought, shortage of harvest. This year, they have more than 1 million bags extra.
Well, let's go back to security first, the national security, as it were. I do want to agree with Mheshimiwa Matangi that the threat by Al-Shabaab and other negative elements is real, and Kenyans ought to focus on that. But we should not focus on that at the exclusion of asking ourselves, what are the founding reasons for this insecurity to come into Kenya? We live side by side with Tanzania. They are not far from here. But the Tanzania has been able to stem some of these challenges because of national cohesion, because they are able to use the balozi ya Mijikumi to stem the challenge, and they are able to identify negative elements in their midst. In Ethiopia, where I lived for 4 years, they are able to do the same thing, and yet they are the longest border with Somalia, and where the threat is coming from. We as a nation must ask ourselves that fundamental question. Why can't we be more cohesive? Why do we allow that a crime committed by a man from my tribe is seen to be less of a crime just because I believe he's doing it on our behalf? The moment we realize that is the moment we'll move away from spending on security, especially within the nation. Number two, on the issue of these areas like Baringo, like West Pokot, and many other parts of 11 counties in Kenya, we need to target the fundamental reasons why there is conflict. Conflict in Africa or anywhere in the world is about resources. And basically in that area is about water and fodder for livestock. And it is not magic. We in the NASA coalition, we are interested in integrated food security program where we are targeting livestock production as one component and crop production as the other component. Now come back to Gulalu, and he has just reminded me the folly of government that pretends to be investing in 1 million acres in Tana River. That is not a possible thing because of the nature of the soil, the trend of movement of the river, changing the course almost 20 kilometers, and they knew these facts. What they should have done is to spend more money in ensuring that there is sustainable food production as they prepare for the long-term damming of the river down to the coast. But for some strange reason, they spent 14 billion. And if they have given 14 billion to areas where we produce maize, we'll be having surplus maize today. Number two, let's not just gloss over and we talk of the drought and all these other issues. They gave us fake fertilizer. The fertilizer that we used last year was fake. The crop that we had at this particular height, almost like 1 foot above the soil, the crop either withered or it looked totally malnourished, and yet we had used fertilizer that we thought it was DAP, only to realize it was 17-17-0 NPK. These are some of the mistakes the government has made, and they pretend that they do not know that is what has happened. Now, finally, on these 1 million acres, I would have expected, and there is conventional wisdom. The British, during the 70 years of colonial rule in Kenya, there is only this country to see which crops can do better. Like Nyandarua, for example, you can do a lot of potatoes. Muranga, where it comes from, you can do tea and coffee. Kiambu, where it comes from, you can also do coffee, tea, and other crops. Dairy. And the dairy. And of course, so this is zoning the country. I know you want just to pretend that that's not the government we have devolved. You have not devolved the issue of value addition. Agribusiness is still a national function.
Waziri is very right. By the way, Waziri is very bright.
Yeah.
He seems to have read my mind because I wanted to tell him exactly that.
But this is a devolved function.
Yes,
but
agribusiness is still a national function. It is supposed to be a county function, but you have not devolved. You have left it here. Even the procurement of some of these machinery for hospitals, they centralized the issue of procuring. Some of the machinery is still lying in yards because they never even took advantage of how are they going to be stored.
And who should have provided fertilizer?
The fertilizer.
Those things are not true.
It's okay, you get a chance.
But the issue is who is right? Who is right?
This idea.
Which idea?
No, this notion of attacking President Uhuru Kenyatta.
I have not talked about Uhuru. I have not talked about Uhuru.
The government, the central government.
Well,
day in, day out.
You know, the problem is why they agitated. They actually provoked me by saying
that's what they do to finish.
The issue is, I'm a farmer in Trans Nzoia. Are you saying the fertilizer I used last year was not fake?
No, you should be asking your governor.
No. And which is why how does
you should be asking?
And governor is not in charge of National Cereals and Produce Board. Fertilizer we bought from National Cereals and Produce Board. When they talk, I keep quiet. When I talk, they agitated.
1 minute.
I made my point. But you see, you spend a lot of time saying nothing, and when I respond to the issues you have raised, you get agitated.
No, but by the way, we were very
these are facts.
very quiet. Very quiet.
No, how can I hold when I'm stating facts? I'm a farmer. I suffered last year.
Okay.
You have. So am I supposed to keep quiet?
No, you have made your point.
And listen to some tyranny of words.
You have made your point. For the record, nobody is saying nothing. Everybody is saying something.
Okay.
And now, what I asked is,
but they are glossing over issues.
You have made
trying to provoke us, telling us, "Oh, NASA is doing this, NASA is doing this." I've also to tell them the truth as it is.
And you have, and you have. I will start with you. You are making a clarification. Senator, I'll come to you. You are making a clarification on some of the issues he's raised.
Kenyans, please don't blame everything on the central government or the government of Uhuru. Please, when you look at the pledges that have been made by NASA. Interrogate them, understand some of those things fall under the purviews of your governors.
Like the issue of fertilizers. Who is supposed to provide fertilizers?
Let me give you a good example.
No. Who is supposed to provide fertilizers to farmers in Kenya?
Governor.
The governor.
Yes, indeed.
Who is supposed to check the quality of fertilizers that farmers get in Kenya?
Those are issues which have been devolved. When you look at the constitution, it's very clear on matters that have been devolved. The role of the central government is just to provide policy direction. But the actual implementers is the county government. And I'm going to give you a good example.
Still on fertilizers.
No,
the fertilizers that farmers got last year, who procured them?
Whereas, of course, I am aware there have been some intervention by the state, by the central government. But to me, that's neither here or there. The buck stops at the office of the governor of a respective county. It is the governor who is supposed to provide for the fertilizer. It is the governor who is supposed, if at all he wishes, that governor is supposed to provide for seedlings. And I'm going to give you a good example. In some counties, I'm aware some governors provided for the fertilizers. I'm aware some governors came up with the seedlings. If it's maize, they provided the actual input, isn't it? They standardized the inputs, and farmers planted. They were given fertilizers. So this idea of where you now start blaming the government for issues regarding agriculture, whereas some governors are not thinking outside the box. They are letting their people to handle these issues without any government support, and then later on you start blaming the presidency. To me, that's very unfair. We need to understand, for instance, if you come in a village where you don't have a good road that has been made, village roads fall under the counties, small bridges fall under the counties, things like agriculture, which Mheshimiwa is talking about, they fall under the county. But this idea of taking all blame to Uhuru is against what is provided for in the country. I
need you to respond to what he said so that we have some order. He mentioned agribusiness and value addition as being functions of the national government under policy matters.
No, you see, policy matter is something that somehow can be quite subjective. The fact that the Constitution talks of central government providing the policy direction in matters regarding agriculture must be understood to mean the overall policy direction of the country, but the actual small policies regarding what fertilizers, those are issues falling under the purview of a county government.
Senator Matangi, in response to the issues he raised and probably shed more light.
Well, yeah, sure. First, I was going to probably in good faith say to Mheshimiwa Kirwa, because I know he's an aspiring senator.
Yes.
And he has not been in the Senate, the house that is mandated by the Constitution to take care of the interest of counties. So he may not understand some of these things, but hopefully he's coming to the Senate. So some of these things he'll get to experience and learn them, there firsthand. So that's why probably you'd excuse his failure to understand some of those things and some of the statements he's making. Because
like which one?
For example, and I don't want to be repetitive on what Mheshimiwa Kangata is saying. We have in the Senate, we are the ones who formed a committee that finally entrenched in law all functions which have been and categorized fully devolved to counties, and some which were not fully devolved, which eventually fully devolved to counties as through the period of transition. And I want to assure Mheshimiwa that if you look at the record of the law now, agriculture is a fully devolved function.
Fully devolved
function. And so anything that he has to ask about agriculture, he should go and talk to a man called Kaemba in his county, and then they can resolve those issues. Secondly, I belong to the Committee on Public Accounts in the Senate, and I can tell you one of the issues we've been dealing with the day in, day out on governance is the procurement, distribution, and facilitation of those things that he's talking about, e.g. like fertilizers, like seedlings, like trees and all that business. This is all within what we have sent as allocations to counties and spent at the county level. And so anything about fake seeds or fake fertilizers and whatever, that one he can solve in Transoya. That is the law. That is the truth. Other than now the petty politicking by NASA and whatever you to gain public money, to get political money. But then let's come to this other issue that Mheshimiwa, as a waziri, especially in agriculture before, he's had a lot of exposure and experience, and it is not acceptable that with that experience he's gained, that with the knowledge he has, that he should look at that camera in the eye and tell Kenyans that it is wrong policy or a wrong decision by government to go and first conceive a project in a place like Tana to make it food secure and come up with a project like Galana Kulalu. And this former minister has traveled to countries like Israel. He has been to countries like Egypt, which has capitalized and made their own country totally food secure using irrigation, from the river Nile.
His point was, rather than put this money there, invest it in the red belt.
Let me make my point.
Yeah.
You see, this country is called Kenya from the tip at the north to the bottom. And when we talk about not only devolving but giving equal chance and opportunity to everybody, that does not mean, and this is what devolution came to solve in the first place, other than now what you're talking about that project, that you'd be looking at some places like, you say, in Tana River, those people should remain with their drought and with their problems, and go and grow food in Transoya and expand and go and take it there if you can, and that should be the way forward for this country. Go and make sure that you invest in that Tana River and make it possible for those people to grow their own food and become food secure and supply the other areas. And I want you to remember one thing. If you look at the ratio of the arable land in Kenya right now as opposed to our total land acreage, it is unbelievably small. So the way forward for this country is to continue reclaiming and growing our arable land and ensure that in those areas we can grow foodstuffs that can be sustained there. And like I've said, we have great examples in the whole world. So because when the project in Galana Kulalu was inaugurated and the first season was planted through, because the results did not come out fully the way they would have been expected and as projected, that became the story that NASA would want to sell, forgetting that there are several interventions that will be done there which already are ongoing, like providing the dam there that will provide enough water for that to be sustainable.
Point made. Was it the last word on this before we take another commercial break as we look at other issues? This is based on the promises that were made by His Excellency the President yesterday as Kenya marked the 54th year of self-rule.
Well, it's dangerous that Senator Wamatangi does believe that all the functions that ought to be devolved have been devolved.
In agriculture?
Yes. I've told him agribusiness is still at Kilimo. It has not been devolved to the outlying areas of various counties. Number two, in terms of the fertilizer I'm talking about, yes, the governor of Transoya did do some intervention in many other areas, including provision of certain amount of fertilizer. But remember, the bulk of fertilizer that gets to Kenya is either imported by the private sector or by the government. The county government do not have the requisite capacity to source for enough fertilizer from all over the world.
And Mheshimiwa, allow me to ask you, you've been in agriculture.
Let me explain to you.
Clear for Wananchi.
Let me explain to you. I've not finished. Charles, I've not finished explaining to you. Give me time.
Yes.
The fertilizer I'm talking about came from the National Cereals and Produce Board, which is a government agency to deal with issues of food security. And to confirm my statement is that 22 officers of the National Cereals and Produce Board were arrested. And I don't know how the case is because they gave us fake fertilizer. I'm a farmer. That never came from the governor. So when we are talking about this, we are not interested. I didn't mention Uhuru's name from the beginning up to the end. But my friend was agitated that I'm targeting Uhuru. I'm targeting National Cereals and Produce Board, which is an agent of government. And they arrested officers. We don't know where the case has gone. And the maize we planted last year, it's not because of drought, it's because of fake fertilizer.
You can allow me to inform him later.
No, what kind of information?
Just go and
Number two, why do we take people to universities to do research? It is because we want to make informed decisions. This issue of Galana, information in my ministry was clear that Galana needed we needed to do what now they are saying they want to do. But they went ahead and said they were irrigating 14 billion, and if you saw the maize that was harvested, one bag of maize was costing 800,000 to produce one bag of maize. So when we talk about these things, it's not about government.
Is that factual? 800,000 to produce one bag?
Do the calculations, 14 billion against the bags that they produce.
From the record?
Yeah.
1 minute. How many bags? 1 minute. 1 minute.
How much did you spend?
Okay. I think it's important that our viewers have this correctly. 14 billion shillings were supposed to be used to transform 1 million acres of land progressively.
Yes.
So when you say one harvest, you take the 14 billion ultimate cost.
But it is a failure. What is the progress?
No.
What is the progress? It was a total failure. And when it is a total failure, they say, oh, there was this, there was this. I do not say the people of Tana River should not be given opportunity to irrigate. But that irrigation could have done better if it was for fodder for livestock.
No,
but not for maize.
Yes, he's listening.
This is a huge project. We are yet to even reach 30% completion rate of that project. The 14 billion has gone towards establishing what we call the infrastructure of the entire project. The harvest we have is what we call for a model farm, not for the entire project, meaning the 14 billion has been employed, for instance, to build offices, to build dams.
So what we can say is that Galana Kulalu has not started producing.
Not yet. The production is what we call a model farm. What we call a model farm of only 5,000.
You told us you are going to produce 10 million bags of maize.
Ultimately, not now.
But you said
ultimately, not now.
But where are the 10 million bags of maize? The other day you are talking of 30,000 bags.
Ultimately, not now.
Which can be produced by one farm in Tanzania.
Number two, I want to support your contention that indeed, for now, that being called National Cereals Board ought not to be giving out fertilizer. That one I concede. It is a national agency thing. We should now be telling counties to be doing that one.
Gentlemen, we take another commercial break. Because Kenyans are suffering for lack of food, the government has been subsidizing maize flour for Kenyans all over. And in so doing, the president yesterday promised that these subsidies will continue until next year. Gentlemen, as you sit here, whether it's the role of the national government or the county government, the Mwananchi there who is going to vote for you people is hungry, and they need a solution now, not tomorrow. We'll come back after this short commercial break, and we'll be looking at more issues in the papers, including 31,000 Kenyans dying every year as a result of tobacco-related diseases.